Well, in just 39 days, voters in several states will decide their next governor. In Arizona, a judge's recent decision to reinstate a century-old abortion ban may have given Democrat Katie Hobbs a boost against Trump-backed Republican Carrie Lake. So let's bring in CBS News political director Ben Gomez to talk more about what is going on. There's a lot of interesting races out there. Arizona's just a start. So how might this abortion ruling impact the race in Arizona?
As you mentioned, just 39 days away to one of the most consequential midterm elections in years. Anne-Marie, last Friday, as you mentioned, an Arizona judge upended the campaign essentially by reverting back to an 1864 law that's before Arizona was a state that bans nearly all abortions across Arizona, a ruling made possible by the Roe v. Wade overturn by the Supreme Court earlier in the year. Hobbs, who's the Arizona's Democratic Secretary of State, seized on this moment and is hoping to galvanize the Democratic base and women voters to counter Carrie Lake, who, as you know, is the former local TV anchor and a big election denier. Most recent polls show a tight race, and Hobbs, who was behind Lake in most of the early polling, is now leading her opponent in some of these polls, but the race is very close still. A new Fox News poll showed that the two are essentially in a statistical dead heat, Anne-Marie.
So let's move on over to the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because there's a couple a couple really interesting races, particularly because of the characters that are running. We will start with the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania. Doug Mastriano, he's got this sort of far-right branding. Is it working in a state that, you know, some consider purple? Because when you look at some of the big cities, when you look at Philadelphia, when you look at Pittsburgh, you know, they lean Democratic, but the rest of the state, not so much.
Yeah, especially that western part of the state. There's a lot of concentration of more Republican voters, if you will, and also outside of Philadelphia, Bucks County. But Mastriano is so far just resonating mainly with his base. His rival, Josh Shapiro, who is the Democratic Attorney General, is crushing him on fundraising. He raised about $25 million between June 7th and September 19th, while Mastriano raised just over $3 million during that same period. According to the records filed on Tuesday, Shapiro's massive cash haul brings the candidate's fundraising total this cycle to more than $50 million, the most of any gubernatorial candidate in the state's history. And he has ads running throughout the state, while Mastriano, who's running as a Christian nationalist, is barely on air and has been virtually abandoned by the Republican organizations who have come to the rescue of other Republican candidates in battleground states. All the latest polls show Shapiro up by double digits. For the most part,
All right, so still with Pennsylvania, the Senate race there.
Very important state.
Right, between Dr. Mehmet Oz and John Fetterman. So just from some of the stuff that I've read, it seems like Republicans are not that crazy about Mehmet Oz, but he is the Republican candidate, so they're willing to vote for him. He's had a couple of missteps. It seems like the gap, though, between the two candidates is sort of closing.
It is. A lot of recent polling this past week showed that the race is tightening, and you're seeing that. I mean, Fetterman, this was his race to lose, and his campaign did a really effective job early on Oz being from New Jersey, his New Jersey roots. They had a strong meme game, if you will, as well on social media. But he has run a barrage of ads against his Democratic opponent, John Fetterman, here. And, you know, there's also been this push by him and also by, you know, op-eds to asking for Fetterman's health records, and so far the Fetterman has not provided. He had that stroke earlier this year that has really sort of changed the dynamic of the race. But it's a tight race here, Anne-Marie. It's very close. Most polls show that this race has now moved to like within the margin of error in some of these polls. So the big debate coming next month between these two, it's one that we're all looking towards in the political world.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that, because I know they were on the fence about whether they're going to have this debate. Apparently they are now, and I think it's going to be must-see TV. Looking at Georgia now, the rematch between Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp. Can Abrams run the same campaign as she did in 2018 and win? Because she didn't the last time around.
Peach State is a huge battleground state, not only during the midterms, but of course during the presidential primary as well. It's a very important state. It's a battleground state, but it's a much different landscape than 2018, Anne-Marie. Primarily because the Democrats and Joe Biden are now in power. In 2018, it was different, of course, with Trump being in the White House. Kemp, the incumbent Republican governor, Brian Kemp, is up 7 points in the latest Fox News poll. Abrams, who's vying vying to become the state's first black governor, has been trailing Kemp in most polls. Last week, she was down 8 points in a survey from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The race is competitive, Anne Marie, but she has a lot of ground to make up in the next 39 days.
And then Texas, Governor Greg Abbott and Beto O'Rourke, they are debating today.
Big debate.
As you know, O'Rourke lost to Ted Cruz for the U.S. Senate race when he ran for that. Is his stance on guns working better this time around?
It is, especially after, of course, the tragic mass shooting of Uvalde, which has really galvanized a lot of Democratic voters, Latino voters in that state. It's still very much keep hearing that it's going to turn blue. Texas is going to turn blue. You hear that from Democrats a lot, but it's still very much a Republican state. It's a tough uphill battle as well for Beto O'Rourke, but he's hoping to try to shorten that gap between him and Greg Abbott. But yes, there is a big debate tonight. We'll see him definitely. I predict he's going to come after him on guns, on immigration, and some other issues as well that he's hoping to close that gap.
We will see how it goes. Yeah,
absolutely, Anne-Marie.
Finn Gomez, thank you so much.
Good to see you.